Hello everyone, and welcome to the CSS Security Mini Briefing, where we will present a short summary of what was released today, November 9th, 2021. My name is Josh Daniel, and I'm a risk manager in the customer service and support organization here at Microsoft. We're going to start this video with an overview of the release, and then we'll dive into a few of the vulnerabilities. Please note that some of the details of the vulnerabilities we're covering in this video may change, and the authoritative location for information will always be the online content in the security update guide. So for November, we have 55 total vulnerabilities that are being addressed this month, which is a little bit lower than what we've been seeing over the past 13 months. Our average over the past almost year is about 79 vulnerabilities per month. And so when we look at some of these total numbers of vulnerabilities, we're definitely going to see some smaller numbers this month than what our averages are. So next we'll look at the CVSS base score. This is an industry standard scoring system where we put in the vector strings and a score comes out, and it's a number between 1 and 10, with 10 being the most severe. This month, the highest rated CVSS score of all of the vulnerabilities from this release is 9.0, which is a little bit lower than what we've been seeing for about the last year of 9.52. When we look at the average CVSS score across all 55 vulnerabilities, this month we have an average score of 6.58, which is significantly lower than what we've been seeing over the past year. In fact, it's the lowest that we've seen in the last 13 months. When we look at critical vulnerabilities, this month we have a total of 6, which is just a little bit below our average. And same thing with remote code execution vulnerabilities. We've been seeing about 27 over the past 13 months, and November there are 15 remote code execution vulnerabilities. Next, we'll talk about publicly disclosed vulnerabilities. These are CVEs that were disclosed prior to today's release in one way, shape, or form. And this month, we have a total of 4 vulnerabilities that are publicly disclosed, which, as we can see, is a little bit higher than what we've been seeing over the past 13 months. And when we look at the vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited, these are vulnerabilities where through some type of telemetry, whether our own or our third-party partners, we've noticed some sort of exploitation. And this month there are 2 vulnerabilities that fall into that bucket, which is just over what we've been averaging over the past 13 months. When we look at the November release at a product level, we see our Windows operating systems towards the bottom of this graph, and then towards the top are the products that are not serviced every single month. And what we'll see here, especially on the Windows side, is we've been averaging in the mid 40s, depending on which product, the number of vulnerabilities per month. And here we can see we're right in the 20s range. And so definitely a lower total number of vulnerabilities throughout these Windows products. First vulnerability that we will cover today is CVE 2021-26443, and this is a remote code execution vulnerability in the virtual machine bus. This is listed as critical, privately disclosed, with no known exploits out in the wild. This is the vulnerability that scored at 9.0 on that scale of 10. And as we look at the vector strings, we can see the attack vector is adjacent, the complexity is low, the privileges required is low, and there's no user interaction. And that's kind of a big thing there. A threat actor could, in the best case scenario for them, they could leverage this vulnerability without any kind of user interaction. The user doesn't have to click on anything to make this happen. However, privileges are required here. So that is a significant thing to note, that this isn't something that an attacker could run wide scale. They have to have low privileges required to leverage this vulnerability. As we can see, there are no known mitigations, no known workarounds to this vulnerability. And the way a threat actor could leverage this is essentially they have to own a virtual machine, and they can create a specially crafted communication sent to the VM host, and an attacker could leverage that to essentially execute arbitrary code on the host operating system. So again, this is a guest to host jump. The fix here to fully mitigate this issue, it's to install the Windows update, and you're protected from this. As far as affected software, we can see it's Windows 11, Windows 10, as well as Server 2019 up through Server 22, so the newer versions of Windows. So if you have those products in your environment, please know that this month's update will address this vulnerability. And sticking with Windows, let's take a look at CVE 2021-38666, and this is another remote code execution vulnerability in the remote desktop client. This is another critical vulnerability, privately disclosed, no known exploits out in the wild. This has a base score of 8.8 on that scale of 10. And as we look at the vector strings, we can see that privileges are required, or no privileges are required on this, but user interaction is required. And so that is significant that, again, a user has to take some kind of steps here in order for a threat actor to fully leverage this vulnerability. But essentially what happens here is an attacker has control of a remote desktop, we'll call it a server, a remote, and a client connects into that server. So attacker owns the server, and a victim connects to the attacking server with a vulnerable remote desktop client, and that could result in remote code execution. So to mitigate this vulnerability, to fully resolve this vulnerability, the cumulative update and monthly rollups and security only updates, if you're on Windows Server 2012 R2 and older, they will all fully resolve this vulnerability. So if you're running Windows Desktop 8.1, 10 through 11, or Windows Server 2012 all the way up through 2022, to fully resolve this vulnerability, all you need to do is install the November updates. So now let's dive into Exchange Server. This month there is CVE 2021-42321, and this is an important remote code execution vulnerability, privately disclosed to Microsoft and known to be exploited out in the wild. This has a base CVSS score of 8.8, and as we can see, the attack vector is over the network. The complexity is low. Privileges required is low. User interaction here is none. So if there's been a few updates with Exchange Server. One of the common things we hear about has to do about the security updates and the applicable cumulative updates. So it's imperative that you are on the latest version of Exchange Server and the cumulative updates that go with them. So for example, Exchange Server 2019, there are only 2 currently supported cumulative updates, and that's CU11 and CU12. And so if you're running on either one of those versions, there's a security update that can address this vulnerability. If you're running on an older cumulative update, there's no security updates available, and you are vulnerable to this CVE until you upgrade your Exchange Server to a supported cumulative update and install the security update. So again, there's a 2-part solution that's required to mitigate this, to fully resolve this vulnerability, and that's to 1, be on a supported version of Exchange Server, and to install the security update for that cumulative update. And one more thing I'll point about this Exchange Server vulnerability is that there's a blog that the Exchange team put together that talks a little bit about this CVE and a couple others that were addressed this month in those security updates. So for more information about that, please see that link down at the bottom. It'll also be in the description down below. And with that, I want to thank everyone for coming today. Appreciate your time. And with that, I'll talk to you next month. Thank you.